The elegant interior of Rendezvous was alive with the quiet hum of sophistication. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over polished tables adorned with fresh flowers and gleaming silverware. Soft music mingled with the clink of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation, creating an atmosphere of refined luxury. Behind the scenes, however, the mood was far from serene. Table 12 is complaining about their appetizers taking too long, Julia, the senior server, informed Mark as she approached him near the hostess stand. Mark, the restaurant manager, glanced at his watch and sighed. He had been juggling complaints and last-minute changes all evening, and his patience was wearing thin. "I'll handle it," Mark said curtly, straightening his tie. He marched into the kitchen where Anita, the head chef, was orchestrating the chaos of dinner service. "Anita, what's going on with Table 12's appetizers?" Mark asked, his tone sharper than intended. Anita barely glanced up from her station. "They're coming. Tell them to wait like everyone else." Mark clenched his jaw but decided against pressing the issue further. Instead, he returned to the dining room where a new presence caught his attention. The entrance doors swung open, and the arrival of Shaquille O'Neal immediately changed the atmosphere. Whispers rippled through the restaurant as the towering figure of the former basketball star entered, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. Dressed casually in a tailored blazer and jeans, his presence was impossible to ignore. Despite his imposing size and fame, there was a humility in the way he smiled and nodded to the staff. Shaq's entourage followed closely, and they were directed to a spacious yet discreet table near the center of the room. "Evening, folks," Shaq said warmly, his deep voice carrying a friendly tone. A few diners snapped covert photos, but Shaq focused on the menu in front of him, unbothered by the attention. Mark observed from a distance, his tension mounting. Great, another celebrity expecting special treatment, he thought bitterly. Though he was the manager, the pressures of the evening had worn on him, and his frustration often surfaced at the worst times. Taking a deep breath, Mark approached the table, carefully masking his irritation. "Welcome to Rendezvous, Mr. O'Neal," he said, his voice polite but stiff. "Is there anything special we can do for you tonight?" Shaq looked up with a smile. "Just water with lemon for now. Keep it simple." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Just water? No champagne or fancy cocktails?" he asked, his tone carrying a hint of sarcasm. Shaq chuckled lightly, unfazed. "Water's good for the soul, my man." Mark forced a smile and walked away, muttering under his breath, "Soul, right? More like your wallet." As the evening progressed, Mark's attitude remained cold. When Shaq politely asked for an extra napkin, Mark rolled his eyes but complied. His annoyance didn't go unnoticed by the other staff, who exchanged uneasy glances but refrained from saying anything. Later, as Mark moved through the dining room, he overheard Shaq making a light-hearted joke with his friends. For reasons even he couldn't fully explain, the warmth and ease of Shaq's demeanor only fueled his irritation. "Must be nice to have everyone fawning over you all the time," Mark muttered as he passed the table, loud enough for Shaq to hear. The table fell silent. Shaq looked up, his calm expression now tinged with curiosity. "You okay, brother?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Mark flushed, realizing he had overstepped. I'm fine," he stammered, quickly walking away. The rest of the night passed in a blur, but the unease in Mark's chest only grew. As the dining room emptied and the staff began cleaning up, the restaurant's owner, Mr. Bennett, approached him. "The owner wants to see you in his office," Mr. Bennett said, his voice unusually stern. "The owner?" Mark asked, confused. "Why? Did I do something wrong?" Mr. Bennett didn't answer, simply gesturing toward the back office. Mark's palms grew clammy as he made his way down the dimly lit corridor. Knocking lightly, he opened the door and froze. There, seated comfortably behind the desk, was Shaquille O'Neal. The same calm smile from earlier played on his lips as he looked up from a stack of papers. "Hey Mark," Shaq said, his tone friendly but firm. "We need to talk." Mark's stunned expression lingered as the weight of the moment sank in. Mark stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing. Shaquille O'Neal, the customer he had dismissed and disrespected all night, wasn't just a VIP. He was the owner. The casual authority with which Shaq sat behind the desk only amplified the gravity of the situation. Mark swallowed hard, struggling to find his voice. "Close the door and have a seat," Shaq said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone was calm, almost friendly, but there was an edge of seriousness that left no room for argument. Mark obeyed, shutting the door behind him and sitting down awkwardly. The silence in the room felt suffocating as Shaq leaned back in his chair, studying Mark with an unreadable expression. "So," Shaq began, folding his massive hands together, "can you tell me what's going on with you tonight?" Mark blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know what you mean," he stammered. Shaq raised an eyebrow. "You don't know?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a lower register. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've had an attitude problem all night. Disrespecting customers, rolling your eyes, snapping at people. And let's not forget that little outburst earlier." Mark flushed, his face heating with shame. I'm sorry. It's just been a really tough day," he offered weakly. Shaq nodded slowly. "Tough day, huh? We all have those. But let me ask you something, Mark. When you're having a tough day, does that give you the right to treat people poorly? Especially in a place like this, where we're supposed to make every guest feel welcome?" Mark hesitated, the weight of Shaq's words sinking in. "No, sir," he mumbled. "Exactly," Shaq said, leaning back again. "Now, I'm not here to embarrass you or make you feel bad. I've been in your shoes before. Maybe not as a waiter, but I've had jobs where I felt underappreciated, stressed, and overworked. But you know what I learned? How you treat people when you're at your lowest says a lot about who you are." Mark nodded, his throat tight. He wanted to defend himself, to explain the pressures he was under, but he also knew that Shaq wasn't wrong. "Now here's what we're gonna do," Shaq continued, his tone softening slightly. "You're going to finish out your shift tonight like a professional. No attitude, no shortcuts. Treat every single customer like they're the most important person in the world. And then, tomorrow morning, you're going to meet me here at 9 a.m. sharp." Mark's eyes widened. "Tomorrow? Why?" Shaq smiled faintly. "Because we're gonna have a little talk about what it means to work here and what it means to work for me. If you're willing to listen and learn, maybe we can turn this around. But that's up to you." Mark nodded again, a mixture of apprehension and gratitude filling his chest. "Yes, sir. I'll be here." "Good," Shaq said, standing up and extending a hand. Mark shook it, noting the strength in Shaq's grip and the sincerity in his eyes. As Mark left the office and returned to the dining room, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Embarrassment, relief, and an unfamiliar sense of hope. The night wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it wasn't just another grueling shift. It was the start of something different. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Rendezvous, casting a golden glow on the polished wood floors. The restaurant, empty of customers, felt almost serene compared to the chaos of the previous night. Mark walked through the front doors with a mix of apprehension and exhaustion. He hadn't slept well, replaying the events of the night over and over in his mind. "What does he want with me?" Mark muttered to himself as he adjusted his tie. He wasn't sure what to expect but knew that ignoring Shaq's directive wasn't an option. The hostess at the front desk directed Mark to the private dining room at the back of the restaurant. As he approached, the faint sound of low melodic jazz greeted him, easing some of his nerves. He opened the door to find Shaq seated at the head of a long table, a spread of breakfast dishes laid out before him. "Morning, Mark," Shaq said with a warm smile, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Come on in. Grab a plate." Mark hesitated, surprised by the casual and welcoming setup. Thank you," he said, taking a seat. He piled some scrambled eggs and toast onto his plate, avoiding Shaq's gaze. "Relax, man," Shaq said with a chuckle. "This isn't an interrogation. It's just breakfast." Mark nodded, though his shoulders remained tense. Shaq poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned back in his chair, his towering frame somehow still commanding even in the relaxed setting. "I wanted to talk to you about last night," Shaq began, his tone steady but firm. "I've been where you are, feeling stressed, frustrated, like the world's on your shoulders. But what I saw from you wasn't just frustration. It was disrespect. And in this business, disrespect doesn't fly." Mark's stomach tightened. "I know, sir. I messed up." "I'm really sorry." Shaq nodded. "I believe you. But here's the thing, Mark. Sorry doesn't fix the culture of a place. What fixes it is understanding why we do what we do." He gestured to the restaurant around them. "This place isn't just about serving food. It's about creating an experience. People come here to celebrate, to connect, to feel special. And every single person on this team plays a part in making that happen." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of Shaq's words pressing down on him. "I get that," he said quietly. I guess I've been so caught up in my own stuff that I lost sight of it." "That's honest," Shaq said, his tone softening. "And I appreciate that. But if you're gonna stay here, you need to do better. Not just for me but for yourself. You have potential, Mark. I see it. But potential means nothing if you don't put in the work." Mark nodded, his throat tight. I want to do better. I really do." "Good," Shaq said with a smile. He pushed a folder across the table. "Take a look at this." Mark opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents inside. They included financial reports, employee evaluations, and customer feedback forms. At the top of one page he saw Shaq's handwritten notes. "Focus on culture. Respect breeds success. These are the behind-the-scenes parts of running this place," Shaq explained. "It's not just about food and service. It's about leadership, vision, and values. If you're willing to learn, I'll teach you. But it's not gonna be easy." Mark looked up, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'm willing," he said. "I want to be better, not just for this job, but for myself." Shaq's smile widened. "That's what I like to hear. Let's get to work." The restaurant hummed with its usual morning activities, staff moving swiftly between tables as they set up for the day. Despite the routine, there was an underlying tension among the team. Word had spread about Mark's confrontation with Shaq, and curiosity buzzed quietly in the air. Mark arrived early, the nervous energy evident in the way he adjusted his tie and smoothed his apron repeatedly. He had spent the previous night reflecting on Shaq's words, grappling with the uncomfortable truth about his behavior. Now he was determined to prove he could change. Shaq entered the restaurant with a casual confidence that immediately drew attention. Dressed in a sharp suit that seemed almost too formal for the setting, he carried himself with an air of authority that demanded respect without words. He greeted the staff warmly, taking time to exchange a few words with each person. When he reached Mark, he paused, his expression unreadable. "Morning, Mark," Shaq said, his deep voice calm. "Morning, sir," Mark replied, meeting Shaq's gaze with a mixture of nervousness and determination. Shaq nodded. "Let's get started." Shaq led Mark to the staff break room where the rest of the team had gathered. It wasn't a typical meeting. The atmosphere was more casual, with people seated around the room instead of standing at attention. Shaq positioned himself at the front, his presence commanding but approachable. "All right, everyone," Shaq began, his voice steady but firm. "I've called this meeting because we need to address something important. This restaurant isn't just about food or service. It's about people. Every single one of you contributes to the experience our customers have. And if one person isn't pulling their weight or treating others with respect, it affects the whole team." Mark felt the weight of the room's attention shift toward him, but Shaq didn't single him out. Instead, he continued, "I've seen what this team is capable of, and I know we can do better. That's why we're starting fresh today. From now on, We're focusing on building a culture of respect and collaboration. And to do that, we need to understand each other. Shaq turned to Mark. Mark, you're gonna start by shadowing each member of the team. Spend an hour with everyone, from the kitchen staff to the front of house crew. See what they deal with every day. And don't just observe, help them. Mark's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. Yes, sir. I'll do it. Mark's first stop was the kitchen. The head chef, a fiery woman named Anita, greeted him with a raised eyebrow. So, you're here to see how the magic happens? She said, her tone half teasing. Mark nodded, rolling up his sleeves. I'm here to help. Tell me what to do. Anita smirked. All right then. Start with these. She handed him a stack of carrots and a knife. Julian cut. Think you can handle it? Mark fumbled at first, his cuts uneven and slow, but Anita's guidance was firm but patient. As he worked, he began to notice the rhythm of the kitchen, the way everyone communicated with quick, efficient words, the unspoken trust between the line cooks. This isn't just cooking, Mark remarked as he watched Anita expertly plate a dish. It's like an orchestra. Anita laughed. Exactly. And if one person misses their cue, the whole thing falls apart. Remember that next time you're serving food out there. Mark nodded, her words sinking in. Next, Mark shadowed Julia, one of the senior servers. She was a whirlwind of energy, moving gracefully between tables with a natural charm that seemed effortless. Rule number 1, Julia said as they prepared a table together. The customer isn't always right, but they always need to feel like they are. It's our job to make them feel special no matter what. Mark watched as Julia handled a difficult customer with grace, turning a potential complaint into a glowing compliment. How do you do that? He asked, genuinely impressed. Julia smiled. It's not about you. It's about them. Once you realize that, everything gets easier. As the day progressed, Mark worked with the dishwashers, the bar staff, and even the janitorial team. Each role brought new challenges and perspectives. He saw the sheer effort that went into every aspect of the restaurant, the late hours, the physical toll, the unspoken pride in a job well done. By the time he returned to Shaq that evening, Mark was exhausted but profoundly changed. ### reflection and growth. Shaq sat in the private dining room, a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up as Mark entered, his expression expectant. So, Shaq said, what did you learn? Mark took a deep breath. I learned that everyone here works so hard and I've been taking it for granted. I've been so focused on myself that I forgot how much effort it takes to make this place run. And how much respect everyone deserves for what they do. Shaq nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. That's a good start. But learning isn't enough. You have to show it. Actions, not words. Mark straightened. I will. Starting tomorrow, I'll do whatever it takes to be a better part of this team. Shaq extended a hand and Mark shook it firmly. Good. Let's see what you've got. As Mark left the room, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful, not just about his job but about himself. The sun was barely up, and a soft mist lingered over the quiet city streets. Mark stood outside Rendezvous, clutching a cup of coffee and staring at the restaurant's elegant facade. The events of the previous day still swirled in his mind, leaving him feeling a strange mix of hope and apprehension. Today, Shaq had asked him to come in early, promising something different. Taking a deep breath, Mark stepped inside. The restaurant was eerily quiet, its usual energy replaced by an almost sacred stillness. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the back. Right on time, came a deep, familiar voice. Mark turned to see Shaq standing by the bar, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Dressed in a sleek tracksuit, Shaq looked every bit the commanding presence he had been yesterday, but there was a warmth in his demeanor that put Mark at ease. Morning, Mark said, his voice cracking slightly. What's the plan? Shaq handed him a mug and gestured to one of the tables. First we talk. Then we work. Mark followed Shaq to the table and sat across from him. The massive man leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Yesterday you learned a little about what it takes to make this place run. Today I want you to understand why it's worth it. Mark raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Shaq set his coffee down. I didn't buy this restaurant because I needed another business. I bought it because places like this, places where people come together to celebrate, connect, and make memories, matter. And they only work when everyone involved believes in that. Mark nodded slowly, the weight of Shaq's words sinking in. So, what do you want me to do? I want you to spend the day in my shoes, Shaq said simply. You're going to run this place. Mark's eyes widened. Run the restaurant? Me? I don't even know where to start. Shaq chuckled. Don't worry. I'll be here to guide you. But you're making the calls. You'll see what it's like to balance a million moving parts, keep the staff motivated, and make sure every customer leaves happy. Shaq led Mark to the kitchen, where Anita was already prepping for the day. Morning, boss, she said with a smirk, clearly enjoying the shift in roles. Mark gave her a nervous smile. Morning, Anita. How are we looking for today? Anita rattled off the day's reservations, special orders, and potential challenges. Mark did his best to keep up, jotting notes in a small notebook Shaq had handed him. By the time she finished, his head was spinning. You'll get the hang of it, Anita said, clapping him on the shoulder. Just don't forget to breathe. From there, Mark moved to the front of the house, where Julia walked him through the server schedules and table assignments. The team's dynamics were more complex than he'd realized, with personality clashes and unspoken tensions bubbling beneath the surface. Mark found himself mediating small disputes, a task that required more tact than he'd expected. The lunch rush hit hard and fast, testing Mark's newfound responsibilities. Within the first hour, a reservation mix-up left a high-profile client without a table, and a kitchen delay threatened to derail a large party's meal. Mark felt the pressure mounting, but Shaq's steady presence was a constant source of reassurance. What's the first rule? Shaq asked as Mark scrambled to resolve the reservation issue. Mark paused, taking a deep breath. The customer isn't always right, but they always need to feel like they are. Shaq grinned. You've been paying attention. With that mindset, Mark approached the situation calmly, offering the displaced client a complimentary drink and a private table that had just become available. The client's frustration melted away, and the issue was resolved without further incident. By the end of the day, Mark was exhausted but exhilarated. He had navigated scheduling conflicts, soothed unhappy customers, and even stepped into the kitchen to help plate dishes during a particularly busy stretch. Through it all, Shaq had been a constant presence, offering guidance and encouragement without taking over. As the last customer left and the staff began cleaning up, Shaq gathered everyone in the dining room. I want to thank you all for your hard work today, he said, his deep voice filling the space. And I want to give a special shout out to Mark, who stepped up in a big way. Running a place like this isn't easy, but he proved he's got what it takes. The team applauded, and Mark felt a swell of pride he hadn't experienced in years. After the staff had gone home, Mark and Shaq sat at the bar, sipping glasses of water. How do you feel? Shaq asked. Mark thought for a moment. Tired, humbled, but proud. I get it now. This isn't just a job. It's a responsibility. To the staff, to the customers, to the whole experience. Shaq nodded, a satisfied smile on his face. That's what I wanted you to see. Now the question is, what are you going to do with it? Mark met Shaq's gaze, his determination clear. I'm going to be better. For the team, for the customers, and for myself. Shaq raised his glass in a toast. That's what I like to hear. Welcome to the team, Mark. The sun was still climbing when Mark arrived at Rendezvous for his second day of training. The restaurant seemed larger, almost daunting, as he prepared to take on his new challenge. Yesterday had been a whirlwind, but Mark couldn't deny the sense of accomplishment he felt. Today, however, would be different. Shaq was waiting for him in the main dining room, leaning against a table with his arms crossed and a confident smile. "Morning, Mark. Ready to step into my shoes?" Shaq asked, his tone both encouraging and teasing. Mark nodded, though his stomach churned with nervous energy. "I think so. What's the plan?" Shaq gestured toward the office. "First, we start with what keeps this place running. The books." In the office, Shaq handed Mark a tablet displaying the restaurant's financial dashboard. It was a sprawling maze of spreadsheets, reports, and analytics. Revenue projections, cost breakdowns, labor expenses, it was all there. "Take a look," Shaq said. "If you're going to run a business, you've got to know where the money's going and where it's coming from." Mark scanned the data, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of it. "I had no idea there was so much to keep track of," he admitted. "Most people don't," Shaq replied. "But this is the foundation. If you can't manage the numbers, you can't manage the business. Take your time and ask questions." Over the next hour, Shaq walked Mark through the financial reports, explaining everything from profit margins to inventory costs. It was overwhelming, but Mark found himself gaining a new appreciation for the intricacies of running a restaurant. After the financial crash course, Shaq led Mark to the kitchen, where the staff had gathered for the morning meeting. The air was filled with the hum of activity as last-minute prep work continued. "All right, team," Shaq began, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. "Mark's running the show today. Give him the same respect you'd give me. And Mark," he turned to face him, "lead by example. You've got this." The staff murmured their agreement, though Mark could sense their curiosity. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Okay, here's the plan," Mark began, his voice steady despite his nerves. He outlined the day's schedule, addressing key challenges and assigning tasks. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to earn a few nods of approval. The lunch rush was a trial by fire. Orders came in fast and the kitchen worked at a frenetic pace. A customer complaint about an undercooked steak threatened to derail the flow, but Mark stepped in with surprising confidence. "Let me handle this," he told Anita, who looked skeptical but stepped aside. Mark approached the table, a warm smile on his face. "I'm so sorry about the issue with your meal. Let me make this right." He offered a replacement dish and a complimentary dessert, diffusing the situation with ease. Back in the kitchen, Anita gave him a grudging nod. "Not bad, rookie." As the day went on, Mark began to notice the subtle dynamics among the staff. He saw how Julia, the senior server, quietly mentored the younger team members. He noticed how Anita's sharp tone masked a deep care for her kitchen crew. And he saw how small gestures of encouragement from Shaq, a pat on the back, a quick word of praise, kept the team motivated. Inspired, Mark made a point to acknowledge the staff's efforts. "Great job on that table," he told Julia after a particularly demanding party. "Anita, the special looks amazing today." The responses were subtle, a nod here, a smile there, but Mark could feel the shift in the team's energy. As the dinner service began, a major problem arose. A shipment of fresh seafood, a centerpiece of the evening's menu, had been delayed. The kitchen was scrambling to adapt and tension was high. "What do we do?" Anita asked, looking to Mark for guidance. Mark hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Then he remembered Shaq's advice. "Stay calm, focus on solutions." "Okay," Mark said, his voice steady. "Let's pivot. We'll push the steak and chicken specials and I'll go out to explain the situation to the customers." Honesty and transparency. It wasn't ideal, but it worked. Customers appreciated the upfront communication, and the team rallied to adjust the menu. By the end of the night, what could have been a disaster had turned into a triumph of teamwork. After closing, the staff gathered for a quick debrief. Mark stood at the front, exhausted but proud. "I just want to say thank you," he began. "Today was one of the hardest days I've ever had, but it was also one of the most rewarding. You all taught me so much, and I'm grateful for the chance to work with such an amazing team." The staff applauded, and Mark felt a swell of emotion. He had started this journey with resentment and frustration, but now he understood what it meant to be part of something bigger. As the staff trickled out, Shaq pulled Mark aside. "You did good today," he said. Mark smiled, his exhaustion evident. "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Shaq shook his head. "Guidance helps, but at the end of the day you stepped up. You proved to yourself and to the team that you've got what it takes. Now the question is, are you ready to keep going?" Mark met Shaq's gaze, his determination clear. "Absolutely." Shaq grinned and patted him on the shoulder. "Then let's make this place even better." The next morning, Mark arrived at Rendezvous feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Yesterday's challenge of stepping into Shaq's shoes had been enlightening, but today promised a deeper dive into the inner workings of the restaurant. Shaq had made it clear that leadership wasn't just about making decisions from the top, it was about understanding and supporting every single role. Shaq greeted him at the door with his usual calm authority. "Morning, Mark," he said. "Ready to see what keeps this place running?" Mark nodded. "Absolutely. Where do we start?" Shaq handed him a clipboard. "Everywhere. Today you're working side by side with the team. Every role, every task. You're going to see what it takes." Mark's first stop was the kitchen, where Anita, the head chef, was already in full swing. The air was filled with the sizzle of pans, the clatter of knives, and the hum of focused conversation. Anita handed Mark an apron and a pile of vegetables. "You're on prep duty," she said. "Let's see if you can keep up." Mark set to work, slicing carrots and chopping herbs. His hands were clumsy compared to the practiced movements of the kitchen staff, but Anita's sharp guidance kept him on track. "This isn't just cooking," she said as she inspected his work. "It's precision. It's timing. Mess this up and the whole dish falls apart." As the lunch rush began, the pace intensified. Mark moved to plating dishes, carefully following Anita's instructions. He marveled at how seamlessly the team worked together, like a well-rehearsed symphony. Next, Mark joined Carlos, the dishwasher, in the back of the house. The room was hot and steamy, filled with the clang of plates and the hiss of running water. "This isn't the glamorous part," Carlos said, handing Mark a scrub brush. "But it's the backbone. If the dishes don't get cleaned, nothing else works." Mark quickly learned how physically demanding the job was. His arms ached from scrubbing pots, and he had a newfound respect for the effort it took to keep the kitchen supplied with clean plates and utensils. "You don't think about it when you're out there," Mark said, wiping his brow. Carlos smiled. "Most people don't. But that's okay. We know how important it is." Julia, the senior server, greeted Mark with a sly grin. "Ready to see how the magic happens?" Mark shadowed her as she navigated the dining room, balancing trays with ease and charming customers with her natural charisma. He was struck by her ability to manage multiple tables while making each guest feel like they were the center of attention. "The trick," Julia said as they reset a table, "is to make it look effortless. But it's a dance. Timing, awareness, and a little bit of showmanship." When a customer complained about a delay, Julia handled it with grace. "I'm so sorry for the wait," she said, offering a complimentary appetizer. "We'll have your meal out shortly." Mark was impressed. "You make it look easy." Julia laughed. "It's not. But when you love what you do, it shows." Mark's final stop was with Greg, the janitor. The older man moved methodically, mopping the floors and emptying trash bins with quiet determination. "This job's not glamorous," Greg said, pausing to wipe his brow. "But it's honest work. Nobody notices when the floor's clean, but they sure notice when it's not." As they worked, Greg shared stories about his years at Rendezvous. His pride in his work was evident, and Mark couldn't help but admire the man's dedication. By the end of the day, Mark was exhausted but enlightened. He had gained a deeper understanding of the effort and skill required for every role in the restaurant. That evening during the team's debrief, Mark stood at the front of the room. "Today I saw just how much heart and hard work goes into what we do," he began. "Every one of you plays a crucial role and I've taken that for granted. I'm sorry for that. But from now on, I'm committed to being the kind of leader who supports you and values what you bring to this place." The team's applause was genuine, and Mark felt a swell of pride and humility. As the group dispersed, Shaq approached him, his expression thoughtful. "You learned a lot today," Shaq said. Mark nodded. "I did. Everyone here is amazing. They deserve more credit than they get." "Now you see what I see," Shaq said with a smile. "And that's the first step to being a real leader." The next evening at Rendezvous felt like a test for Mark, a culmination of everything he had learned. The team's energy was high but cautious, as if they were waiting to see if the changes they had witnessed in Mark would hold under pressure. For Mark, this was more than a shift, it was his chance to prove that he belonged. Mark arrived early, walking the floor with purpose. He checked every detail, from the arrangement of the tables to the lighting and music. When Julia passed by with a tray of glasses, she raised an eyebrow. "You're making a habit of this," she said, a teasing smile on her face. Mark chuckled. "If I've learned anything, it's that preparation makes all the difference." As the team gathered for their pre-shift meeting, Mark stood at the front with a calm confidence. "Before we dive in, I just want to thank you all," he began. "Yesterday was an eye-opener for me. Seeing the effort and passion each of you puts into this place has been humbling. Tonight, I want to support you the way you've supported me." He handed out envelopes containing handwritten notes for each team member. Julia opened hers first and read aloud with a grin, "Your energy lights up the room, and your dedication inspires everyone around you." "Not bad, Mark." The room warmed with smiles and murmurs of appreciation. Even Anita gave him a small nod, her usual stern expression softening. The dinner rush hit fast and the restaurant buzzed with activity. Orders flooded the kitchen, and the servers moved with practiced efficiency. Mark positioned himself where he could be most helpful, filling in gaps and resolving issues as they arose. When a miscommunication led to a table's order being delayed, Mark stepped in. He approached the table with a sincere smile. "I'm so sorry for the wait. Let me bring you a complimentary appetizer while we get your meals ready." The customers nodded, their frustration easing. Back in the kitchen, Mark worked alongside Anita to expedite the delayed dishes. "You're getting the hang of this," Anita said, glancing at him as she plated a dish. Mark smiled. "I had a good teacher." Midway through the evening, an unexpected large party arrived without a reservation, throwing the seating arrangements into chaos. The hostess looked to Mark, panic in her eyes. "We'll figure it out," Mark said, his voice steady. He quickly reorganized the floor plan, shifting tables and communicating the changes to the team. Within minutes, the party was seated, and service continued smoothly. Shaq observed from a corner table, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp. When Mark glanced at him, Shaq gave a subtle nod of approval. Throughout the night, Mark focused on lifting up his team. He noticed Sam, the youngest server, struggling with a large tray and stepped in to help. "You've got this," Mark said, steadying the tray. "Just take your time." Sam smiled, visibly relieved. "Thanks, Mark." Moments like this played out repeatedly. Mark refilled water glasses, cleared tables, and even handled a spill in the dining room without hesitation. Each act reinforced his commitment to the team, and their respect for him grew. As the last customers left and the restaurant quieted, the team gathered for the closing debrief. The exhaustion on their faces was tempered by a sense of accomplishment. "You all were incredible tonight," Mark said, addressing the group. "The way you handled challenges and supported each other is what makes this place special. Thank you for letting me be part of it." The team erupted in applause, their approval genuine. Shaq stepped forward, his towering presence filling the room. "Mark's right," Shaq said. "Tonight wasn't just about getting through a busy shift. It was about showing what this team is capable of when we're united. And Mark, you've shown us that you're ready to lead. The applause grew louder and Mark felt a swell of pride and gratitude. For the first time he felt like he truly belonged. After the team dispersed, Mark and Shaq sat at the bar, nursing glasses of water. The restaurant was quiet now, the lights dimmed, and the air filled with a faint scent of citrus and cleaner. "You did good tonight," Shaq said, his voice filled with pride. Mark smiled. "Thanks. It feels good to finally get it right." Shaq nodded. "It's not just about one night though. Leadership is about showing up every day and making everyone around you better. Keep this up and you'll go far." Mark looked at Shaq, his gratitude evident. "I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for believing in me." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Shaq said with a grin. "You just needed someone to remind you what you're capable of." The following week brought a new challenge to Rendezvous. A prominent food critic, known for their sharp pen and uncompromising standards, had booked a reservation under an alias. Shaq had received word through his network and decided to keep it quiet, sharing the information only with Mark. "This is your test," Shaq said, leaning against the counter in the office. "Critics like this can make or break a place. But more than that, this is about showing what we've built here. Can you handle it?" Mark nodded, determination etched on his face. "I've got this." Mark spent the next few days preparing the team. He held extra training sessions to refine their service techniques and worked closely with Anita to perfect the menu. "Everything needs to be flawless," Mark told Anita as they tasted dishes. "Not just in flavor but in presentation." Anita's smirk showed her confidence. "Flawless is my middle name, rookie. Just make sure the front of the house keeps up." Mark also focused on morale, ensuring that the team felt supported and ready. He even adjusted the schedule to give everyone time to recharge before the critics' visit. The night of the critics' visit, the restaurant sparkled with polish. The team moved with synchronized precision, their energy calm but focused. Mark took a deep breath as the clock struck 7, signaling the start of the dinner service. The critic arrived shortly after, a middle-aged individual with a sharp gaze and an air of quiet authority. Mark greeted them personally, masking his nerves with a warm smile. "Welcome to Rendezvous," he said. "It's an honor to have you with us tonight." The critic nodded, their expression unreadable. "Let's see if the reputation holds up." The service unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Julia led the servers with her usual charm, ensuring that each table received impeccable attention. Mark shadowed the critic's table, watching from a distance to ensure everything went smoothly. Anita sent out dishes with precision, the kitchen operating like a well-oiled machine. Each plate was a masterpiece from the appetizer to the dessert. When the critic requested a modification to their main course, Anita adjusted with ease, muttering, "Anything to keep them happy." Mark delivered the modified dish personally. "Chef Anita wanted to make sure this was exactly to your liking," he said. The critic tasted it, their face giving nothing away. "Thank you," they said simply. Midway through the evening, disaster struck. A power surge briefly dimmed the lights, causing a momentary disruption in the kitchen. The ovens faltered and orders began to back up. Panic rippled through the staff. Mark stepped in immediately. "Anita, focus on what you can finish. I'll explain the delay to the tables." He moved through the dining room, addressing customers with calm professionalism. "We're experiencing a slight delay due to technical issues, but I assure you your meals will be worth the wait." The critic watched him closely, their eyes narrowing in what Mark hoped was approval. With the ovens restored, the team rallied. Anita pushed out orders with renewed focus, and Mark coordinated the servers to ensure dishes were delivered promptly. Despite the setback, the customers remained satisfied, thanks to the team's composure. As dessert was served, the critic requested to speak with Mark. He approached the table, his heart pounding. "Your team handled that disruption well," the critic said. It's rare to see such professionalism under pressure. Mark exhaled, a small smile breaking through. Thank you. We believe in creating an experience that goes beyond the food. The critic nodded. It shows. After the critic left, the team gathered for the closing meeting. The tension in the air was palpable as they waited for Mark to speak. You all were incredible tonight, Mark said, his voice steady. We faced a challenge and you didn't just rise to the occasion. You excelled. No matter what the review says, I'm proud of every one of you. The team erupted into applause, their camaraderie stronger than ever. As the restaurant emptied, Shaq approached Mark. You passed, he said simply. Mark laughed. I'm guessing the critic wasn't just about the restaurant? Shaq grinned. Nope. It was about you. And you proved you can handle the heat. You're not just managing this place, Mark. You're leading it. Mark felt a wave of pride and gratitude. Thank you, Shaq. For everything. Shaq clapped him on the back. Keep it up. The sky's the limit. The days following the critic's visit were filled with anticipation. Mark tried to focus on the day-to-day operations, but the looming prospect of the review hung over the restaurant like a storm cloud. The team shared the same quiet nervousness, though they continued their work with professionalism and care. Finally, the review was published. Shaq called an impromptu meeting, gathering the staff in the main dining room before service. He stood at the head of the room, holding a copy of the article with a knowing smile. So, Shaq began, his voice carrying a calm authority, are you all ready to hear what the world thinks of Rendezvous? The room was silent, all eyes on him. It's glowing, Shaq said, his grin widening. The critic loved everything, the food, the service, the atmosphere. But what stood out most was how we handled the unexpected. They wrote that this place isn't just a restaurant, it's an experience. Cheers erupted from the team. Mark felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him as Shaq handed him the article. His eyes scanned the lines, his name mentioned alongside phrases like grace under pressure, and a team led with heart. That night, the restaurant was busier than ever, with customers eager to visit the place now hailed as one of the city's finest. The atmosphere was electric, but the team moved with the same calm efficiency they had honed over the past weeks. Mark floated between tables, checking in with customers, assisting servers, and even sneaking into the kitchen to give Anita a thumbs up. Don't get used to this, Anita said with a smirk. I still run this kitchen. Mark laughed. Wouldn't dream of taking your throne. After closing, the team gathered for a toast. Shaq stood at the center, raising a glass of sparkling cider. To the best damn team in the business, he said. You all showed what it means to work together, to adapt, and to shine under pressure. This success is yours as much as it is mine. The team cheered, clinking glasses. When the noise subsided, Shaq turned to Mark. And to Mark, Shaq said, his tone serious but warm. You came in here with something to prove and you proved it. You've grown into a leader not just by what you do but by how you inspire others. I'm proud of you, man. Mark felt a lump rise in his throat. Thank you, Shaq. That means more than I can say. But I couldn't have done it without this team, or you. The team clapped and cheered again, the camaraderie filling the room. As the staff dispersed for the night, Mark and Shaq sat at the bar, sipping water and reflecting on the journey. You know, Shaq said, when I bought this place I didn't just want it to be successful. I wanted it to be meaningful. A place where people could grow, learn, and feel like they're part of something bigger. Seeing you and this team come together, that's exactly what I hoped for. Mark nodded. It's more than a job now. Feels like a home. And I want to keep building on that for everyone here. Shaq smiled. Then you're exactly where you're meant to be. The restaurant scene is deserted, the tables set for the next day, the soft glow of the lights casting a warm, inviting hue. Mark locks the door, stepping outside into the cool night air. He pauses, looking back at Rendezvous, a small smile on his face. As he walks away, the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses lingers, a testament to the transformation he and the team had achieved. Fade to black. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support more powerful storytelling like this. And don't stop there, turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next video. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below to let us know how this story impacted you or what you'd like to see next. Your feedback helps us create meaningful content that connects with you. Thank you for being a part of our community. Your voice matters. Folded Hands Sparkles.